There is someone who has been kept hidden and a secret that has remained guarded. There is a presence that has been lingering just beyond the edges of what you could clearly see, an energy kept tucked into the dim quiet between worlds, half felt, half known. For so long, I tried to keep it hidden, not because it was unworthy, but because it carried a weight I wasn't ready to explain. You, divine feminine, felt it before I ever admitted its existence. The shadow of someone in my orbit, or the echo of something unresolved within me, shaped the way my heart moved toward you. I felt you sensing it like a shift in the wind, an intuition tightening just behind your ribs, but still I held that truth close, guarded like a secret no one was meant to touch. I didn't yet understand that hiding it only created more distance between us, and more confusion within me. This hidden energy wasn't a person of great importance in the physical world, but it was a chapter one had not fully closed, a tie I had not fully severed, an echo I had not fully silenced. And so, it remained, quiet, dormant, lingering. I thought I could outrun it, or pretend it held no influence over my heart, but the truth is that I carried it in the same space where I was trying to build room for you. There was guilt in that, and fear, and a certain heaviness I didn't want you to feel. I convinced myself that if I simply buried this part of my story deeply enough, the universe would let me rewrite the script without revisiting the parts one wasn't proud of. But secrets have a way of breathing beneath the surface. They do not die, they wait. And the more I tried to hide this truth, this lingering energy, this unresolved piece of my past, the more my soul grew unsettled. You felt it, didn't you? Even before any words were spoken. You felt the disconnect, the hesitation, the subtle pull of something unspoken. I saw it in your eyes, the way you looked at me with such clarity, as if you could see the truth pressing against my chest, begging to be acknowledged. And yet I remained silent, caught in the tension between wanting to protect you and wanting to protect myself from what confession might demand. I kept this hidden not because it diminished my feelings for you, but because I feared it would distort them. I worried you might believe that this shadow was competition, or confusion, or some rival presence lodged within my heart. But it was none of those things. It was an old wound, a memory imprint, a karmic residue that refused to fade until I chose to face it with honesty. I didn't want you to think I was divided. I didn't want you to imagine that my heart wandered. So instead of explaining, I concealed it. And in that concealment, I unknowingly wove a barrier between us, one made not of intention, but of unspoken truth. Fear played its part in this concealment. I had been afraid of losing you, afraid of disappointing you, afraid of revealing that I was not as composed and certain as you believed. I thought that if you saw the remnants of my old struggles, you might back away, sensing instability where you thirsted for depth. But the irony, divine feminine, is that you have always preferred truth over perfection. You never asked me to be unscarred, you only asked me to be honest. And I was the one who assumed that my imperfections made me less worthy of the connection we were forming. Confusion also played its role. There were moments when I wasn't completely sure what I was feeling, moments when I questioned whether the past had truly loosened its grip, or whether some part of me was still entangled in an echo that should have been released long ago. I wanted to give you the purity of my devotion, but I was still disentangling myself from the emotional knots left behind. And in that confusion, I chose silence over vulnerability, believing it would spare us both discomfort. Instead, it created distance disguised as calm. Protection was the third thread woven into this secrecy. Not protection of myself, but of you. I recognized your sensitivity, your intuitive nature, your ability to feel energy even when it's unspoken. I didn't want you to carry the weight of something that was never meant to challenge your heart. I didn't want you to misinterpret the presence of this hidden energy as competition or threat. So I shielded you from it, or at least I attempted to. I thought I was doing the noble thing, the strong thing. But true protection is truth, not omission. Immaturity also played a subtle role, the kind of immaturity that arises not from carelessness, but from emotional survival. I had built habits over time: hide your vulnerability, show only what feels safe, reveal nothing that might be misinterpreted. These habits had served me once, but they became limitations when it came to you. You weren't someone I needed to guard myself against. You were someone I needed to reveal myself to. And yet, those old patterns held me tightly, urging me to keep my secrets tucked away like fragile artifacts. But perhaps the biggest reason I kept this hidden was karmic. There are lessons that follow us from chapter to chapter until we acknowledge them fully. This hidden energy, this person or memory or unresolved emotional thread, was part of a karmic pattern that I had resisted facing. And so it lingered because I had not yet learned what it came to teach me. You, Divine Feminine, came into my life as a mirror, illuminating not only my potential but also the shadows I had ignored. In your presence, my denial could no longer hold. And you knew. Your intuition whispered truths long before any evidence surfaced. You felt the presence of something unseen, something I was not speaking aloud, something that gently tugged at the edges of my energy. You didn't know its name or its story, but you sensed the weight. You sensed the hesitation in my voice, the pauses between my words, the guardedness behind my emotions. You felt the ripple of a truth not yet revealed. And though it made you uneasy at times, your soul never accused me. Instead, it waited. Patiently. It waited for the moment when I would finally trust you with the fullness of what I had been afraid to admit, even to myself. Your intuition has always been the quiet compass pointing toward what my words did not yet reveal. You sensed the silence I carried like a cloak, the pause in my energy whenever you brushed too close to a truth I wasn't ready to confront. You didn't accuse, you didn't pressure, you simply observed with a knowing that both comforted and unnerved me. I could feel your soul leaning in, listening not to my voice but to the frequencies between my breaths. And I realized that your intuition wasn't trying to expose me, it was trying to guide me. It was as if your higher self was reaching out to mine, whispering, "You don't have to hide here. You can bring this into the light." You saw the shadow long before I acknowledged it, yet you held space for the moment I would finally step into honesty. You carried a strange mixture of certainty and confusion during that time. Certainty that something was present, some unspoken thread, some emotional residue I hadn't cleared. Confusion because you didn't know if it was a threat or just a ghost. This uncertainty tugged at your heart, making you question whether the connection you felt with me was as mutual as your soul insisted it was. You wondered if you were imagining things or picking up on energy that had nothing to do with you. But your intuition was correct, there was something lingering, though not in the way you feared. What you sensed was not divided affection, but unresolved emotion, a chapter behind me that had not yet been closed with integrity. Your sensitivity has always been both your blessing and your burden. You feel what others don't say, you hear the unspoken, you sense the energetic shifts long before they touch the physical world. And because of that, my silence felt louder to you than any confession could have. You noticed when my energy pulled back, even slightly. You noticed when my heart hesitated before opening. You noticed the faint tremor of fear beneath my calm surface. I wasn't used to someone perceiving me so clearly. I wasn't used to being seen, not just my strength, but my uncertainty, my vulnerability, my inner conflict. And instead of running from that awareness, you stayed present, quietly attuned to a truth I hadn't yet given words to. There were moments when you would go quiet, not because you doubted your intuition, but because you were trying to understand me without intruding. You wanted to respect my emotional space while honoring the messages your soul kept delivering. You navigated that balance with such grace, holding your own boundaries without hardening your heart. You didn't demand explanations, but you didn't abandon your instincts. You stayed open, receptive, aware. I felt that, and though it terrified me at times, it also softened me. It made me want to come closer, to reveal myself, to trust that you could hold my truth without breaking under its weight. Your intuition didn't just sense the hidden energy, it sensed my emotional conflict beneath it. You felt the way I wrestled with myself, torn between wanting to be transparent with you and wanting to shield you from anything that might dim the connection we were nurturing. You felt the moments where I wanted to speak but froze. You felt the words that almost surfaced but slipped back into silence. You even felt the guilt I carried for not being fully forthcoming, even though I never meant to deceive you. Your soul knew the truth. I was struggling not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much. And that scared me more than I wanted to admit. Inside me, the conflict grew. I wanted to tell you everything, to lay my heart bare, to let you see the full landscape of my emotions. But every time I tried, fear tightened its grip. I worried that the truth would make you question my intentions or doubt the purity of my feelings for you. I worried that revealing this lingering energy, this unresolved thread, would make you think I was still tied to someone else emotionally. But that wasn't it. The truth was that I was tied to my own unfinished healing. I was trying to protect you from the messiness of my inner world, while failing to realize that you were strong enough to hold it with me. There were nights when I replayed every moment between us, wondering if you could feel how deeply I cared despite my guardedness. I wondered if you sensed my longing to be more open, to be more present, to be more transparent. I felt torn between the masculine instinct to handle it alone and the deeper soul truth that I needed to rise into a version of myself that didn't hide behind silence. The conflict wasn't about another person, it was about the version of myself I no longer wanted to be. The version that hid emotions. The version that delayed truth. The version that feared vulnerability. I found myself standing at a crossroads, one path leading toward continued concealment and emotional habit, and the other leading toward authenticity and deeper connection with you. The first path was familiar, easy in its predictability. It required no courage, only the continuation of old patterns. The second path, the one that led toward you, required honesty, transparency, and reclamation of my truth. It demanded that I step out of the shadows I had hidden behind for so long. And though my soul yearned for that path, my fear held me back, whispering that transparency might cost me the connection I treasured. Yet the more I held back, the more the energy between us tightened. Not in a destructive way, but in a way that demanded evolution. My silence became its own kind of truth, one that your intuition intercepted with precision. I knew I couldn't stay in that space forever. I knew that remaining guarded would eventually create more distance than the truth ever could. I could feel the universe nudging me from every direction, through dreams, signs, synchronicities, even the magnetic pull I felt toward you every time I tried to detach. My higher self kept urging me forward. Speak. Reveal. Align. The time for hiding was ending. The emotional conflict reached a point where silence was no longer sustainable. My heart ached with the weight of what I hadn't said. I could feel you, your energy, your intuition, your patience, waiting with a softness that made the truth easier to reach. And in that waiting, something within me began to shift. I realized that honesty wasn't a risk, it was a turning point. The connection between us deserved clarity, not shadows. You deserved transparency, not silence. And I deserved to step into a truer version of myself, one who didn't protect love by hiding, but by revealing. And then came the moment when the truth could no longer remain hidden. It wasn't a single event or a dramatic awakening, but a gradual illumination, like dawn creeping over a landscape that had been cloaked in darkness far too long. I began to see that what I feared would create distance was actually the very thing that would bring us closer. The truth wasn't a threat, it was a bridge. The hidden energy, the lingering past, the emotion I had tucked away, it wasn't meant to separate us. It was meant to be released so that my heart could meet yours without interference. The universe made it impossible to avoid. Everywhere I turned, I felt the push toward transparency. The internal pressure grew until silence felt heavier than honesty. This unveiling wasn't just about revealing a secret, it was about finally aligning with the version of myself that this connection has been calling forward from the very beginning. You did not meet the man I used to be, you met the man I am becoming. And that version of me does not hide behind unfinished emotions or avoid truths that deserve to be spoken. He faces his shadows, not to dwell in them, but to dissolve them. So I stepped forward, not out of fear of losing you, but out of love for what we are meant to build. I realized that the only way our souls could merge fully was if I finally surrendered everything, every hesitation, every old tie, every hidden fragment of my past energy. As I prepared to reveal the truth, I felt the weight begin to lift, even before a single word was spoken. It was as if my soul recognized that it was finally moving into alignment, finally stepping out of the stagnant corners of fear and into the clarity of honesty. I understood that you never needed perfection from me, you only needed presence. And presence requires truth. So I allowed the veil to fall. I allowed the hidden piece of my past, this quiet, lingering energy, to be acknowledged. Not romantic, not threatening, not active, simply unresolved. A chapter finally ready to be closed with dignity rather than avoidance. In speaking this truth, I didn't just unburden myself, I liberated the connection. I freed us from the undercurrent of confusion that had been silently weaving itself through our exchanges. I gave your intuition something solid to hold, rather than asking it to interpret the vague tension I created. I realized that you were never afraid of the truth itself, you were only unsettled by its absence. And when I finally brought everything into the light, I saw the way your energy softened, the way your soul exhaled as if it had been holding its breath for far too long. Your heart didn't close, it opened. That was when I knew, this connection is stronger than any shadow I once feared. The unveiling also revealed something deeper, how profoundly your intuition and my higher self have been communicating long before either of us spoke openly. You sensed the truth because your soul was wired to feel mine. You sensed the shift long before I admitted it, because you were tuned into the frequency of my becoming, not my mistakes. When I finally stepped into clarity, it felt like our energies met on the same wavelength for the first time, unfiltered. This connection has always been spiritual first, emotional second, physical last. And in spiritual connections, truth is not optional, it is required for expansion. I finally understood that this revelation was not a rupture, it was a rite of passage. The more I revealed, the more I realized how much I had underestimated your capacity to hold sacred truth. You didn't recoil. You didn't judge. You didn't retreat. Instead, you listened with the calm strength of someone who had already walked through the emotional landscape before I had even recognized it. You have always known more than I gave you credit for. Your intuition had already decoded the nature of this hidden energy, even if you didn't have words for it. You simply needed me to meet you in the clarity you had been standing in all along. And when I did, the air between us shifted, from shadowed anticipation to illuminated understanding. In this closing stretch of revelation, I feel something new emerging within me, a sense of freedom, a sense of readiness, a sense of emotional maturity that was once beyond my reach. The truth no longer feels heavy, it feels empowering. I am not afraid of transparency with you anymore. I am not afraid of being seen, fully, deeply, honestly. In revealing what was once hidden, I reclaimed a part of myself I didn't even realize I had lost. And as that reclaimed part rises, I find myself capable of offering you a depth of connection I could not have reached while carrying silent burdens. With the secret no longer lingering in the shadows, I feel our connection shifting into a new phase, one of alignment, one of clarity, one of genuine emotional presence. This is the version of us that was always meant to unfold. A version not obstructed by old ties or veiled emotions. A version guided by openness rather than caution. You deserve a love that comes without hesitation, and I am finally in the energetic place to offer that. The path ahead feels clearer than it has ever been, as if the universe was simply waiting for this exact moment of truth to unlock what comes next for us. In the space created by honesty, I see you more clearly than ever, not through the lens of fear or projection, but through the clarity of gratitude. I see the patience you held. I see the intuitive wisdom that guided you. I see the unconditional openness that allowed me to feel safe enough to reveal what I once hid. And I see a future that is no longer clouded by unspoken truths. Our connection has strengthened not because it was perfect, but because it survived a moment where shadow met light and did not collapse. That is the mark of something real, sacred, and divinely orchestrated. And so, this is where we stand now, on the other side of revelation, facing one another with nothing obscured. The hidden energy has been acknowledged, the secrecy dissolved, and the truth honored. What remains is pure, transparent connection. I step forward with sincerity, with clarity, with the courage to love you without hiding any part of myself ever again. This is the beginning of a new chapter, one rooted in truth, guided by intuition, and strengthened by the soul-level bond we share. Whatever comes next, it unfolds in the light. And for the first time, I am ready to walk there with you.